welcome to the Glucose Goddess Show. I'm Justine Chuspé. I'm a biochemist obsessed with helping you understand how your body works so that you can live the life that you want to live. In today's episode, we are covering hormones, fertility, polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, menopause, etc. I'm really excited to dive into this topic because it's more connected to glucose than you might think. Let's get to it. So first things first, let's talk about your hormonal system. Your hormonal system is the one that keeps your hormones in balance and in check in your body. And if your hormonal system is out of whack, if it's stressed, if it's imbalanced, if it has any issues, then you might see symptoms like polycystic ovarian syndrome, fibroids, endometriosis, difficult menopause, PMS, so premenstrual syndrome, missed periods, etc. All of these things, all of those symptoms are indications that your hormonal system is not functioning as it should. It's not functioning at its best. It is stressed out and it's having problems. Now, here's the key. The thing with your hormonal system is that it goes hand in hand with your metabolic system, with your glucose regulation. So if your glucose is out of whack, your hormonal system is going to have a really hard time functioning properly. And so in this episode, I'm going to cover all the different details that are going to show you what you need to do to get your glucose nice and settled, nice and balanced, so that you give your hormonal system as much of a leg up as you possibly can. And very often when we address an underlying glucose issue, a lot of hormonal problems go away. So, maybe you've been trying to have a baby and you can't seem to get pregnant. Maybe PCOS is causing you to have acne, to lose hair on your head, to grow hair on your face. Maybe you have lots of missed periods and you're wondering, what does that mean about what's going on inside your body? Maybe you're going through the menopause right now and all the changes are feeling like a total earthquake, hot flashes, night sweats, insomnia. You do not feel like yourself. A lot of these things can get much, much better. And maybe you're somebody who has crazy PMS, lots of cravings before their period. Maybe you have debilitating endometriosis or fibroids. These are not a sentence. We can do something about them because remember, in the body, everything is connected. So a symptom you might experience, like the ones I just mentioned, is not an isolated incident that just lives there on its own that you can't do anything about. They're often a consequence of other stuff going on. We need to think about the body in a functional way. And the first place to look is to make sure that your blood sugar, your glucose levels are in balance so that you're not making these issues worse or causing them. Again, hormonal system and your glucose are like two peas in a pod. They need to be working together. So we're going to look at your glucose levels and how it interacts with your hormonal system and hopefully fix some of those issues. First, the topic, fertility. So this is for people who are trying to conceive and who may be having a hard time. And it can be a quite stressful experience. I have a lot of friends right now going through it and it sucks. So let's look at what the science says. Interestingly, the level of insulin in your body, and if you remember, insulin is a hormone that gets sent out by your body when you have a lot of glucose spikes. It's a hormone that is there to help reduce those glucose spikes. And interestingly, if somebody has glucose spikes for a long time, their insulin levels start to rise. And when your insulin levels are high, that is actually a signal to your brain that tells it, hey, this body is not necessarily fit for reproduction. High insulin levels signal that reproduction is not the priority. There's other stuff going on that needs to be fixed. It's not a, okay, we're ready to have a baby signal. It's rather a, I'm not sure how fit this system is right now to conceive signal. And that's why in the studies we see that high insulin levels are tightly linked to low fertility in both males and females. In males, dysregulated glucose levels and high insulin levels are associated with decreased semen quality, so that's fewer viable candidates, and an increased risk of erectile dysfunction. So much so that a really interesting study showed that erectile dysfunction might actually be one of the first signs of having too much insulin in your body. So the study was called Erectile Dysfunction May Be the First Clinical Sign of Insulin Resistance and Endothelial Dysfunction in Young Men. And what they found was a very strong correlation between erectile dysfunction and high insulin levels. So that's in males. What about in females? Well, in females, one of the most common causes of infertility is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And polycystic ovarian syndrome is sort of an umbrella term that covers lots of different symptoms. And polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS, is today one of the leading causes of infertility in females. Concretely, what does PCOS do? If you have PCOS, you're not going to be ovulating on a regular schedule. You might miss your periods. You might be not ovulating at all. So let's dive into PCOS because it is the #1 issue for fertility in females. PCOS is a growing health concern, by the way. It's today affecting 1 in 8 females in the world. That is a super, super, super large number. And it often goes hand in hand with high insulin levels. So if you've been diagnosed with PCOS, it's likely that you've also been diagnosed with insulin resistance, because high insulin levels are usually one of the causes of PCOS symptoms. It's not the only cause. Some females have PCOS without high insulin levels, but in most cases, you see both go hand in hand. So let's look at what actually happens in the body when there's too much insulin and what is causing the PCOS symptoms. Okay, so as I mentioned, insulin is released in the body in response to big glucose spikes. So if you've been eating in a way that has been leading to glucose spikes for many years, your insulin levels are slowly going to rise. And after a certain point, there's so much insulin in your body that it's going to lead to a couple things. First, high insulin levels tell your ovaries to produce testosterone. Testosterone is the male sex hormone. It's totally normal and healthy for females to have some amount of testosterone. But if you have too much, problems start happening. Notably, if you have too much testosterone in a female body, that is going to cause a lot of the PCOS symptoms, such as balding on the head, hair growth on the chin, acne, missed periods, lack of ovulation, etc. And that's not the only thing. Usually in a female body, testosterone gets naturally converted to female hormones. When there's high insulin levels present, that conversion of male to female hormones does not happen so well. So you're in a situation where in a female body you have all this excess testosterone and your body is not disposing, not transforming it well. So you end up with way too much of this male sex hormone, and that leads to all of the issues that I just mentioned. Another common symptom when you have PCOS is that if you're trying to lose fat or burn fat, it's really difficult for you, because when you have high insulin levels, your body is not able to burn fat. Insulin tells your body, hey, it's time to store glucose away into your fat cells, notably. And when there's a lot of insulin present, it tells your body it's not time to burn fat. We're not burning fat. Fat is not going anywhere. So if you're in this situation, it is super stressful, it's very hard to live with, and it can become very confusing and overwhelming because you have all these different things happening at once. So you have the symptoms on your face, you have the excess testosterone, you have the missed periods, you have the insulin resistance, and I know it can feel overwhelming and like a total nightmare, but here's what's great about this information is that we understand that the common cause of all of this is usually this high insulin level. And it's totally possible to get those insulin levels down through food, through using, notably, my glucose hacks. Because when you use my glucose hacks, you reduce your glucose spikes. And so when there's fewer glucose spikes, your body releases less insulin as well. So you're able to slowly get that insulin down, slowly get that testosterone down, and slowly your symptoms go away. So PCOS is not something that you are born with. It's not something that you cannot do anything about. It's usually just a consequence of this glucose and insulin issue happening within. And one thing that I see really often is that when somebody gets diagnosed with PCOS, they are usually put on the birth control pill. Now, why is that? Because, as I explained, PCOS is a condition in which you have too much testosterone, too many male hormones compared to the female hormones in your body. And so that imbalance is causing the symptoms. Now, the birth control pill, what does it contain? It contains female hormones. So if you supplement daily with these female hormones, you're going to bring that balance back up. And so there's going to be less imbalance between testosterone and female hormones. And so slowly that balance is going to come back up and you're going to exhibit fewer symptoms. Your period will come back, you will have less facial hair, you will have less acne. But here's the issue. While this can bring a lot of relief, for sure, in the short term, if you then try to have a baby, and in order to have a baby, you have to stop the birth control pill. Well, the moment you stop the pill, that imbalance will present itself again. You will have this excess testosterone in the body. So you're not going to be ovulating as regularly. You're going to have all those PCOS symptoms come back. And this is something that I see so often. I get so many messages from women who have been on the pill their whole life. And then, they find a partner and they want to have a kid. And they stop the pill and they're just not ovulating. And they're not able to have a baby. And so it can be really stressful and damaging. And then it can lead to very quickly going to things like IVF, which are, a big burden and a lot of work and time and money to get done. So it's important to realize that there's actually something that you can do. If you fix your insulin levels, you would be probably able to get that balance back to where it's supposed to be and to say goodbye to those symptoms and to that PCOS. And a great example of this is in my second book, The Glucose Goddess Method. I recruited 3,000 people to go on this 4-week plan during which they implemented into their lives my 4 most important hacks: savory breakfast, vinegar, veggie starter, and movement. And in those participants, there were quite a few women who were trying to conceive and who were having a really hard time. So they were looking forward to trying out this method to see if it would help them. And during the course of these 4 weeks, by just adding those 4 hacks into their lives and not changing anything else, 3 women got pregnant that were having a really hard time conceiving beforehand. So just to show you, this change can happen really quickly, especially if you've been eating in a way that creates lots of glucose spikes for your whole life. These simple hacks can truly transform your hormonal system, your body from within, and really make a difference. So if you're feeling like you want a 4-week step-by-step guide, The Glucose Goddess Method, my second book, is a really good place to start. But I also have a free resource in the description of this episode with a 1-pager with all of my 10 hacks. And that's free. You can download it now. So if you're not feeling like you want to buy a book right now, totally fine. But have a look at those 10 hacks on that free PDF because they can help you a lot. And finally, on the topic of PCOS, now, glucose is not the only solution to PCOS. You will have people who have PCOS but don't have high insulin levels, don't have high glucose levels. And in that case, there's lots of other things to look at. Environment, chemicals, seed oils, lots of stuff to look at. But in most females, getting their glucose levels under control brings a huge amount of relief and alleviation of those symptoms and gets that testosterone down. And one quick study that I just wanted to mention that was one of the first ones showing that high insulin levels stimulates testosterone production in the ovaries. It dates from 1998 and the title is Insulin Stimulates Testosterone Biosynthesis by Human Thecal Cells for Women with Polycystic Ovary Syndrome by activating its own receptor and using inositol glycan mediators as a signal transduction system. That's a mouthful. You don't have to remember that, don't worry about it. But there's really interesting science out there showing us this super important link. Okay, last topic in this episode, I want to mention menopause. I am not going through the menopause yet, but I speak to a lot of women who are, and I know that things can feel really, really difficult, that you are no longer yourself, all your energy is gone, you don't sleep well, you feel different, you feel like something's off, something's wrong, and it's because during the menopause, you have a huge crash in female hormones, and that impacts every single system in your body, your organs, your brain, how you feel, your personality. It's really tough, and things can feel completely out of control, so if you're going through that, just know that you're not alone. And interestingly, there are things that you can actually do to alleviate your symptoms and help yourself feel better. And you guessed it, one of the first places to look is at our glucose levels because, again, as I mentioned, our glucose levels and our hormonal system are so tightly linked together that if you're going through the menopause and you have lots of glucose spikes and really high insulin levels, things are going to go way worse for you than if you have stable glucose. So if you want to help yourself, it's not a pleasant experience, but if you want to make things a little bit better, a little bit easier, and help yourself suffer less, let's look at your glucose levels first, my dears. Let's do that. A really interesting study from Columbia University, a 2020 study, showed that flattening glucose curves is associated with fewer menopause symptoms, such as insomnia and night sweats. And this is something else that is quite unfair. A recent study called Menopause is Associated with Postprandial Metabolism, Metabolic Health, and Lifestyle showed that during the menopause, again, because your hormonal system and your glucose and insulin levels are so tightly linked, during the menopause, things start changing. And that crash in hormones, in turn, affects your glucose levels. So this study found that postmenopausal females had higher fasting glucose levels, higher sugar intake, and bigger glucose spikes compared to premenopausal females. So after the menopause, your glucose and insulin system don't work as well as they used to. So the same foods after the menopause are going to create bigger glucose spikes than before. I know, it sucks. There's no two ways around it. That's just terrible. It's very unfortunate and it's unfair. But this also shows us that if you want to thrive after the menopause, it is even more important for you to balance your glucose levels. Because if the exact way that you used to be eating is now going to cause bigger glucose spikes, well, that means that you're going to be creating more cravings in your body, more fatigue, more of this sugar addiction roller coaster, more inflammation, poorer sleep if you're eating in the exact same way. So if you're going through this, it's the perfect time to start looking at your food habits, and it's the perfect time to make sure that you are not creating glucose spikes in your body. Again, download the free PDF in the description of this episode with my 10 core hacks. This is the basis, this is the foundation. So whether you're going through the menopause right now and you want to alleviate symptoms and help yourself feel better, start with your glucose levels, or if you're postmenopausal and you're noticing your body is not the same as it used to be, again, have a look at the hacks. These are going to help you tremendously. Okay, my dears, that's all we have time for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, download the free PDF in the description with my 10 core hacks to get started. I wish you well. I wish you luck. Just know that you're not alone and your hormones will respond really well to getting your glucose levels under control. So there's lots of hope. You have lots of power and agency and you're in the right place. So start it out and let me know how it goes. Lots of love.